Is this supposed to be a signature or a seismograph reading? The voice, sharp and laced with youthful arrogance, cut through the quiet hum of the First National Bank. Elias Thorne, his hands still resting on the counter, felt a familiar tremor pass through his fingers, a phantom echo of shrapnel long since removed. He looked up, his faded blue eyes meeting the disdainful gaze of the bank teller, a young man barely out of his teens, whose name tag read Chad. Teller smirked, tapping an impatient finger on the withdrawal slip. Elias cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. It's the best I can do, son." The tremor wasn't just in his hand. It was a deep, resonant ache from old wounds, both seen and unseen. He was here to access a small portion of his disability pension, a sum that barely covered the rising cost of his medication and the rent on his modest apartment. He clutched the worn strap of his canvas satchel, the same one he'd carried through 3 tours. This daily battle for dignity, for simple respect, was often harder than any firefight he'd endured. If you believe true heroes walk among us, often unseen and uncelebrated, comment, respect below. Elias Thorne was a man etched by time and trials, his face a roadmap of a life lived intensely, though his current circumstances were deceptively quiet. A slight, almost imperceptible limp accompanied his movements, a souvenir from a long-ago jungle. His clothes, though clean, were threadbare. Speaking of lean years and a disinterest in material trappings, he lived alone in a small, sparsely furnished apartment on the city's forgotten fringe, his days marked by a quiet routine, a walk in the park if his leg allowed. Reading worn paperbacks from the local library and these increasingly challenging trips to the bank, few knew the man he once was, the leader he had been, the sacrifices he had made. He preferred it that way, seeking no accolades, only a measure of peace. But peace was often elusive. When faced with the casual cruelties of a world that judged too quickly by appearances today, that judgment was embodied by Chad, whose polished shoes and crisp uniform seemed to amplify Elias's own worn state. The bank was moderately busy, a lunchtime lull giving way to a new wave of customers. Their impatient sighs formed a subtle chorus behind Chad's overt disdain. Chad snatched the slip back. "Well, your best doesn't match the signature card we have on file, sir," he said, the "sir" dripping with sarcasm. "Not even close. Standard procedure dictates I can't process this." He pushed the slip back towards Elias with the tip of his pen, as if touching it might contaminate him. Elias felt a flush creep up his neck. "My hands, they aren't what they used to be," he offered quietly, hoping for a sliver of understanding. "Old injuries, sometimes they shake." Chad rolled his eyes, a theatrical display of exasperation for the growing line behind Elias. "Look, Gramps, everyone's got a story. I've got a job to do. Rules are rules. Either you can sign properly, or you can't get your money. Simple as that." He leaned back, arms crossed, a smug sentinel guarding the bank's coffers from an apparently dubious threat. An older woman behind Elias tutted audibly, but said nothing. A businessman checked his watch with an annoyed huff. Elias felt their collective impatience like a physical weight. He was an inconvenience, a glitch in their smooth, efficient day. The fluorescent lights of the bank seemed to glare down, exposing his tremor, his frayed collar, his quiet desperation. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his hand, to summon a stillness that had long deserted his limbs. He picked up the pen again, his knuckles white. He concentrated fiercely, trying to force his rebellious muscles into submission. To recreate the familiar loops and angles of his name as it had once been, the ink stuttered across the paper, a jagged line that bore only a passing resemblance to the fluid script on his old identification card. It was perhaps even worse than the first attempt. Chad let out a short, derisive laugh. "Still looks like you're drawing mountains. I'm going to have to get my manager. Don't go anywhere," he added, as if Elias, in his slow, deliberate way, was capable of a quick escape. Chad sauntered off towards a glass-walled office, leaving Elias standing at the counter, the object of curious and pitying stares. Moments later, Chad returned with Miss Albright, the branch manager. She was a woman in her late 30s, impeccably dressed, her smile professionally polite but cool. "Good afternoon, sir," she began, her eyes briefly flicking over Elias's worn attire before settling on the problematic withdrawal slip. "Chad tells me we're having a little trouble with your signature." Her tone was measured, but underlying it was the same impatience refined and corporate. Elias repeated his explanation about his hands. Miss Albright listened with a neutral expression. "I understand, sir, but bank policy is very clear on signature verification-esque." Verification-esque, she paused, glancing at her monitor. "The Thorn Endowment Trust. This is a significant account with very specific protocols." A flicker of surprise crossed Elias's face. He wasn't accessing any Thorn Endowment Trust. He was trying to withdraw $200 from his pension account. "Ma'am," he began, "there must be a mistake. I'm just here for my pension." Miss Albright frowned, tapping at her keyboard. "The account number you provided on this slip, Mr. Thorn, is for the Thorn Endowment. Are you claiming you didn't write this account number?" She held up the slip, and Elias squinted. He'd meticulously copied the number from his pension statementor, so he thought, had his failing eyes betrayed him too. Or, perhaps in his tremor, he'd transposed a digit, inadvertently landing on something far beyond his humble means. I might have," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The situation was spiraling. Miss Albright's professional demeanor hardened. "Sir, attempting to fraudulently access an account of this magnitude is a serious offense." Her voice was low but carried an unmistakable threat. "Given the discrepancy in the signature, the unusual account number, and your presentation, I'm afraid I'm going to have to escalate this." She picked up her desk phone, her gaze fixed on Elias, a look that mingled suspicion with a hint of something like alarm. "Yes, connect me to Mr. Harrison's office immediately. Tell them it's urgent. Branch Manager Albright, First National, Main Street, regarding the Thorn Endowment." She listened for a moment, then her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "He's on his way here." Her voice lost some of its cool composure. She hung up the phone slowly, looking at Elias with a new, uncertain expression. The air in the bank suddenly felt charged. The earlier impatience replaced by a palpable, nervous tension. Less than 5 minutes later, the hushed ambience of First National Bank was shattered too. Sleek black sedans with tinted windows glided to a silent stop directly in front of the main entrance. Their polished surfaces reflected the stunned faces of passersby. The doors opened in unison, and 2 men in impeccably tailored dark suits and subtle earpieces emerged. They moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency, their eyes scanning the surroundings, their presence alone radiating an aura of serious authority. These were not ordinary bank security. They entered the bank, one holding the door for the figure who followed Dot, Mr. James Harrison, CEO of First National Bank Corporation, a man whose photograph occasionally graced the financial pages, his expression usually one of intense focus. Today, that focus was razor-sharp. His silver hair was neatly combed, his stride purposeful as he surveyed the suddenly silent bank floor. Employees froze mid-transaction. Customers paused, conversations dying on their lips. The atmosphere crackled. Miss Albright visibly paled, smoothing down her skirt with trembling hands. Chad, who had been smirking in the background, felt his jaw go slack. The 2 escorts positioned themselves, flanking the entrance, their stances relaxed but alert. Mr. Harrison's gaze swept across the room, a silent inquiry that demanded answers. His eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned past the tellers, past the anxious face of Miss Albright, and then they stopped. They locked onto the stooped figure of Elias Thorn, still standing forlornly at the counter. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Harrison's face. Surprise, then a deep, furrowed concern that softened the stern lines around his mouth. He changed direction, bypassing the manager completely, and strode directly toward Elias. "Elias," he said. His voice, though not loud, resonated with authority and a surprising warmth. "Elias Thorn. What in heaven's name? I wasn't expecting to see you here today. Are you all right?" Chad, recovering some of his misplaced bravado, and clearly not recognizing the CEO, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm handling this customer. There's a security issue with his." Mr. Harrison silenced him with a glacial stare, a look so potent it made Chad physically recoil, as if struck. Harrison's attention was solely on Elias, his expression now one of grave concern as he took in Elias's worn appearance and the withdrawal slip still clutched in Miss Albright's hand. Beside him, his gaze then fell upon the slip noting the shaky signature and then to Chad's still faintly smug expression. And finally, to Miss Albright's flustered state, the warmth in Harrison's eyes vanished, replaced by an icy disapproval. He turned slowly to Miss Albright, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Miss Albright, perhaps you'd care to explain precisely what is happening here." Miss Albright stammered, words failing her. "Mr. Harrison, sir, there was a discrepancy with the signature and the account number he provided. It was for the Thorne endowment." Mr. Harrison took the slip from her nerveless fingers. He looked at the shaky signature, then at Elias, whose quiet dignity seemed to grow under the CEO's respectful gaze. A profound sadness touched Harrison's features. "This signature," he said, his voice now rising, carrying to every corner of the suddenly tomb-like bank. He turned to face the staff and the few remaining customers, his eyes blazing. "This man," he declared, his voice resonating with power and raw emotion, "is Captain Elias Thorne, United States Army, retired. 2 silver stars, 3 bronze stars, a Purple Heart so laden with oak leaf clusters it's a wonder he can bear its memory, let alone the medal. He didn't just serve this country, he bled for it. He led men through unimaginable hell and brought most of them back." The Thorne endowment you so casually referenced, Miss Albright, was established by his great-grandfather, founder of this very bank. An endowment that Captain Thorne himself, with quiet humility and a considerable portion of his own remaining family capital, personally rescued from insolvency during the 2008 financial crisis when others, including some on our own board, were ready to let it tend to the hundreds of scholarships and community projects it funds collapse. Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "That seismograph reading you so callously mocked, young man," he said, fixing Chad with a withering glare, "is the enduring mark of a hero who shielded his men from mortar fire, whose hands still carry the tremors from nerves shattered not by age, but by courage." Chad's face was ashen, his earlier arrogance completely deflated, replaced by a stark, dawning horror. Miss Albright looked as though she might faint, her eyes wide with disbelief and shame. The weight of Mr. Harrison's words settled upon them heavy and irrefutable. The 2 escorts by the door stood a little straighter, their expressions unreadable, but hinting at a deep respect for the scene unfolding. "This bank," Harrison continued, his voice softening slightly but still firm, "stands on principles of integrity, service, and community. Principles Elias Thorne has embodied his entire life, often at great personal cost. He lives modestly, not because he has to, but because he chooses to, pouring his resources into helping other veterans, into funding the very endowment you denied him access to for his own meager pension." He gestured to the withdrawal slip. "He wasn't trying to access the endowment, Miss Albright. He was trying to withdraw $200 from his pension, and one of your clerks due to an apparent clerical error on Mr. Thorne's part, an error born of injury, not intent-decided to treat him like a common criminal." He paused, letting the silence magnify the impact. "The Thorne family name is literally carved into the cornerstone of this building. His signature, however it may look today, is worth more than this entire branch's daily receipts." He turned back to Elias, his expression now gentle. "Elias, my deepest apologies. On behalf of First National Bank, I am profoundly sorry for the disrespect you've endured. Allow me to handle this personally." Elias, who had stood silently through the CEO's impassioned defense, simply nodded. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of quiet, overwhelming relief of dignity. Finally, unexpectedly restored, the aftermath was swift and decisive. Mr. Harrison personally escorted Elias to his own private office upstairs, settling him into a comfortable leather chair and ordering coffee. He processed Elias's pension withdrawal himself, adding a considerable sum from his personal account as a long-overdue gesture of appreciation. Chad was not seen at his teller window again. Hushed rumors circulated about an immediate termination, and a mandatory bank-wide memo on customer respect. Miss Albright was summoned for a very long, very uncomfortable meeting with Mr. Harrison and Human Resources. Within a week, new training programs on sensitivity, veteran affairs, and recognizing non-obvious disabilities were being rolled out across all First National branches. The bank also made a substantial new contribution to the Thorne endowment, publicly rededicating it in Captain Elias Thorne's honor. For Elias, the change was more personal. The next time he visited the bank, a different, older teller greeted him by name with a warm smile and an offer of assistance before he even reached the counter. The quiet respect he received was a balm to old wounds, recognition that went deeper than any medal. He continued his modest life, but with a renewed sense of peace, the shadows of disrespect finally receding. The incident served as a stark reminder to all who witnessed or heard of it. True worth, true heroism, often walks in humble guise, and respect is a currency owed to all, regardless of appearance or station. Judgment is a poor substitute for compassion. The story of Captain Elias Thorne and the CEO's intervention became a quiet legend within First National Bank, a cautionary tale and an inspirational benchmark. Miss Albright, to her credit, took the lesson to heart, becoming a staunch advocate for improved customer relations and community outreach, particularly towards elderly and disabled clients. The branch itself underwent a subtle transformation, the atmosphere becoming warmer, more human. Mr. Harrison made it a point to personally call Elias once a month, not as CEO to a valued account holder, but as one man to another, checking in, sharing stories. The Thorne Endowment, revitalized and now more prominently associated with Elias's living legacy, expanded its reach, helping more students, more veterans, more community initiatives than ever before. Elias, with the unexpected additional funds from Mr. Harrison, did exactly what the CEO suspected he would. He set up a small, informal fund to help fellow veterans navigate the bureaucratic hurdles of accessing their own benefits, providing them with the quiet support and dignity he himself had so often been denied. The lingering image is not of a grand ceremony, but of Elias sitting in his small apartment, carefully writing a check, his hand still trembling, but his purpose firm to help another aging soldier afford a new wheelchair. A small act, mirroring a lifetime of quiet, profound service, for true honor is not in the recognition we receive, but in the respect we give. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more stories that remind us to look beyond the surface and honor the hidden heroes among us. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Sparks for more powerful narratives. Type honor in the comments if you believe in the enduring power of respect